From beating up a Logan Paul lookalike to having a career high against Conor McGregor, which made him the UFC thug he is, here are Nate Diaz's most devastating moments. I mean, sure, most of them are fights, except this one took place outside of the cage and had some police involvement. So recently, Nate made quite some headlines, as he took the internet by storm when word got out that he had an arrest warrant out for him. And what looked like your annual Nate Street Brawl, things took a turn when the UFC star put someone to sleep on the streets of New Orleans. Now, from miles away, that someone at the time appeared to be his opponent, Jake Paul's older brother, Logan. But sadly, it was not Logan Paul. No, really, the guy Nate Diaz choked out on the street actually goes by the name of Not Logan Paul, which is because of the guy's uncanny resemblance to the YouTuber. I mean, although fans initially were happy that Logan Paul got slapped by Diaz, things took a turn when the guy fell out cold and hit his head on the road. Youch! Soon after that, the cops dropped by and charged Diaz with second-degree assault, issuing him an arrest warrant. The accusation was verified by a New Orleans Police Department spokesperson, where the NOPD filed the allegation after obtaining footage of the alleged event. The report stated that Diaz had apparently strangled an unresponsive Rodney Peterson, which is not Logan Paul's real name, during an altercation that spilled outside of a club. As I mentioned, later, Peterson caught a horrific head wound and threatened to exact revenge on Diaz, who had traveled to New Orleans to cheer on teammate Chris Avila in a match at Misfits Boxing 6. According to the officer, the police on Bourbon Street were called over to break up an intense brawl. In a video of the incident that went viral, a police officer can be seen attempting to break up the fight that was spilling out of the place. But despite that, he still missed a blonde-haired guy who fell unconscious to the ground, later identified as Peterson. But here's what I don't get. You see, battery charges are not easy to get rid of. That too, second degree in Louisiana? I mean, this one is a felony that carries a maximum 8-year prison sentence, with or without hard labor. Plus a fine as small as $2,000, maybe even both. Okay, maybe I do get it. I mean, come on, the guy looked like Logan Paul. Anyway, that was for his devastating moment outside the cage, at least one of many. But wait till you hear what he does inside the cage. Because of the evolution Nate has had, he transitioned from the Ultimate Fighter and got himself a UFC contract, all while showcasing the potential of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not just that, but his fluidity on the mat, mastery of submissions, and the ability to control opponents on the ground became his trademark. Throw that in with how good he is at striking. Sheesh, that's an Avengers-level threat. Although it was his grappling that made him so famous, he possessed a unique boxing style, often relying on his long reach and high volume output of punches. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about the choke finishes for a moment. Because boy, they are the ones that make Nate the devastating fighter he is today. You see, his ability to secure chokes and other forms of submission has been crucial to his growth as a fighter. And one of the choke moments that made headlines all over was undoubtedly Nate's double bird triangle. Now everyone knows what Diaz's kryptonite is: wrestling. Of course, whether or not this is accurate, the general assumption is that grounding Diaz will take his edge away, allowing a fighter to unwind from their unrelenting boxing assault. However, putting Diaz on the mat is, again, kind of a risky move. And if you're Rory McDonald, the risk may just pay off. But if you're Kurt Pellegrino, then boy do I have some bad news for you. You see, Pellegrino almost had Diaz in 2008. He pulled whatever he had in his arsenal. But as I said, if you're Kurt, you're in a world of hurt. Because with just a few minutes left, Diaz put on a triangle choke and it was game over. And the funny part is, Nate was already posing for the camera, celebrating and flexing his biceps, all before his opponent had even tapped. Kind of a badass origin story, honestly, because the audience was not having it. And that's a Nate special, just like his intense rivalries. You see, since he has competed in a number of notable fights over the course of his career, that's one of the reasons he got the chance to defend his title as the celebratory Baddest Mother Effer (BMF) champion by making a silver-plated championship belt in his honor. Now, this is an example of how the dude just held the UFC fans in sway. Although he fell to Masvidal, that still didn't stop him from doing devastating things. Or have you forgotten how he deleted Gray Maynard in round 1? So, due to his lack of knockouts, the former lightweight contender is frequently referred to as having pillow-fisted punches. Only 5 of Diaz's opponents have been knocked out in his career. Because of this, his second fight against Gray Maynard in the Ultimate Fighter 18 finale stands out as a performance to remember. Even more so, considering that their first encounter resulted in a razor-thin split decision victory for Nate Diaz. Now, Maynard was also a very successful fighter at the time, having suffered just 2 defeats. And the fans were stunned when Nate Diaz brutally thrashed him in the first round alone, because he struck the guy with a 20-hit combo, before he was finally dragged away by the referee. But that's nothing. Our boy was still evolving, because UFC 263 was where he rocked Leon Edwards. Yeah, I'll admit Diaz's welterweight career hasn't produced many victories, but it has produced a number of noteworthy moments. But this Edwards fight? I think thrilling is not enough of a word. You see, this was Diaz's first contest in over 2 years. The fight mostly went as expected, with Edwards outstriking the Stockton veteran and displaying a considerable amount of dominance. What's more, throughout the bout, Rocky even succeeded in tripping Diaz many times. But Nate almost stunned the world by rocking his opponent in the last seconds of the 5th round, and with a superb southpaw right jab and a straight left combo that snapped Edwards' head sideways. To capture the moment in time, a bruised and battered Diaz pointed mockingly at a wobbly Edwards, and after nearly 5 rounds of domination from Leon Edwards, Diaz was the only thing fight fans across the world could recall after nearly knocking Edwards out. Now, sadly, he couldn't finish it off, but boy, his moment had people on the edge of their seats. But let's move on from fights for a moment and take a look at his post-fight interview on UFC on Fox 17. Alright, so back when Nate Diaz took a year off from the sport, following his exciting first-round TKO victory over Gray Maynard, he then came back to take on Dos Anjos, the eventual lightweight champion of the UFC. Unfortunately, the younger Diaz's attempt to halt the Brazilian's winning streak was in vain. Diaz took a second year off from the UFC after losing a lopsided fight to RDA. When the Stockton icon eventually made it back, he was scheduled to take on Michael Johnson in a contest that many at the time believed was one-sided. But to everyone's shock, Diaz appeared better than ever and outboxed his opponent. He then followed one of the most notorious callouts in UFC history, which was cut short by Joe Rogan's effort to commend Nate Diaz for his performance as he entered the octagon for the post-interview. And please, don't let Chandler mislead you that he has the best callouts, because Nate seized the opportunity to attack Conor McGregor verbally. He accused the Irishman of stealing all he had worked for and vowed to fight him, and thus started the fire versus ice. As the post-fight interview not only ignited an epic rivalry, but it was sure as hell entertaining. Because when Diaz was chosen as McGregor's opponent by the MMA gods to dethrone Conor, McGregor ended up losing to Nate in the second round of UFC 196. When RDA withdrew due to a fractured foot from the fight that was supposed to be the main event, Diaz took over when Jose Aldo turned down the UFC's invitation to fill in as a last-minute substitute. The Stockton great was as confident as ever, despite having only 11 days to get ready. Nobody anticipated him to win. In fact, because of the little amount of time he had to prepare, it didn't really matter to the former lightweight. Cause when the two fought, Diaz spent the opening round stooping to avoid McGregor's blows, which made the Irishman fall into giving Nate an opening. After a while, Diaz started to take the Notorious down, raising his guard and tucking in his chin to block every blow, and making sure that any punches that managed to get through his guard landed on his forehead. Plus, McGregor had to continuously adjust his favorite counterpunching distance as a result of Diaz's offensive push, which broke up Conor's flow. After the first round, McGregor was worn out, and within the next few minutes, Diaz stunned the Irishman with a 1-2 combo, and he dove in for an untimely takedown, and eventually used a rear naked choke to secure his biggest victory yet. So, from completely annihilating Conor in a career-making moment, to destroying Logan Paul's doppelganger, that was all for Nate Diaz's most devastating moments.